So good morning, everybody, and good afternoon. Daniel, thanks very much for joining us from Australia. Looks like the sun is shining this morning, or this afternoon. Whereabout are you?
We're in Sydney at 6:30 p.m. here, Stephen.
Lovely.
So wrapping up the day.
It's dark in London at the moment. And how's your day been today?
Yeah, big day, big workshop this morning, and then a couple of coaching clients this afternoon. So always action-packed, plenty on. We love it that way.
Brilliant. Well, I'm incredibly grateful for you joining this morning. Good morning, Andy. Thanks very much for watching. You can blame James Trimble for this. So James came on a couple Fridays ago, was excellent, added loads of value and loads of content. Morning, Ashley. Thanks for joining. And he said that you have impacted his career down there. I know obviously he was based here and then came over and joined you. Always a woman involved, so took him over there with his kids and got a lovely life there. Morning, Andy. Thanks very much for joining us. Just looks like anybody beginning with an A is watching today, so it's a bit strange. If there's any B's and C's, say hello as well. So Daniel, great. I mean, thank you for sending over your profile. So you were fully licensed estate agent at the age of 18, owned your first real estate business at the age of 19. Been involved in over 5,000 sales, really impressive. You've worked with the best entrepreneurs in Australia. What made you decide to go into real estate to begin with at such a young age?
I tried to get a commerce degree and failed halfway through the first semester, Steve, and actually came back to my parents' house. I was living there at the time with my tail between my legs. My parents were reasonably strict, and my solution to that was getting a certificate of registration in real estate. So I did that almost reluctantly, but I fell in love with the industry ever since. So I worked as an agent, then a business owner at the age of 19. And at that time, I was the youngest licensed real estate agent in Victoria, which is in Australia, down south. And from there, I was very entrepreneurial, started my own business. We had one of the largest by the age of 20 in the country, which is down in Little Old Hobart. That's the island off the bottom of Australia. And there, about 2005, I got poached by McGrath Estate Agents. So I sold the business. We were one of the first businesses, as far as I'm aware, in Australasia where our strategy was all about not having individual agents working on their own, rather business units where you'd have a lister and a seller, a buyer manager, and then an admin person driving that team. And so we got that up and running. And at that time, McGrath was doing the same, and they franchised in 2007. Then I basically got poached to build all their training, sold the business, and here I am 23 years later as a career coach.
Amazing. Well, John McGrath, I'm a massive fan. I think he's the best estate agent I've ever come across. A few of us went out to ARIC 2 years ago, and we have the privilege of going to the McGrath office in Sydney, and we spent 4 hours with Troy Malcolm, the head of learning and development there. And I've actually brought Troy over for the last 2 years running. So he's delivered some workshops for me, and the insights have been amazing. So you were able to sit down with John McGrath and pick his brain, and he's exceptional. And so what did you learn from being with John?
Look, I think just standards. I remember one of the first times we went out, we did a listing presentation. I thought I'd gone well, and then on the way back, he said, Dan, you could have done this, you could have said that, you should have prepared that a little bit more. So what I've learned from him is standards and structure around process. So just his ability to be able to go right down to the attention to detail, and be able to be very process driven, whereas a lot of salespeople do wing it. I think that's his ace card. So a lot around that. I think other than John, I mean, there's a lot of great people that drive that brand that I had to study and pretty much pull out of their head all the content. So what we did back then was we mapped out, a prospecting, pitching / listing, selling methodology, buyer, vendor management, right through to customer life process. And a lot of estate agents don't realize, I mean, the average process that we build, and I'll usually build about 15 to 20 of these customer journeys a year with a lot of major brands, is there's usually a couple of hundred steps that go into the process. And some of these better agents that we're working with now are really systemized around their process, and they just don't have anything to chance, Steve.
So let's start, here, prospecting. So, you know, John makes agency very simple, and, you know, he came on and he did a morning live with Troy as well. And he talks about agency as 4 things: prospecting, listing, negotiating, and selling. And if you become a master of all those skills, absolutely fantastic. So I know a lot of people that are watching this, they find prospecting incredibly challenging. They find getting a higher fee challenging, because at the moment, or not at the moment, it's been a long time, it's a race to the bottom here. So would you be kind enough to share some prospecting tips as to what works for agents over there, and why consistency is very, very important in getting it done? And morning, Jeremy, thanks for joining. Morning, Chris, thanks for joining. Morning, Vicky. Morning, Sarah, thanks for getting up so early to watch Daniel. Really appreciate it.
I had 2 agents for the first time last month, Stephen, that made over 30 sales per month. Now, these are separate vendors and buyers. That had never happened in my career. One guy was a guy called Matt Steinway. He works for McGrath. He did 34 sales and just wrote under $1 million, who I personally coached him in his business unit. The other was a guy by the name of Luke Sacco, who's a company that works for Nelson Alexander in Victoria. So when you're doing that volume, which is a sale a day, you know, you can't just use one traditional prospecting method. You have to be very systematic about how you go about things. So I recently did a conference. It was about a month ago. We had about 1,000 people in the room, and to prove this point, I actually said to the people in the audience, you know, stand up if you got the marketing for the event. And Steve, I reckon about 150 people stood up. I then asked those people to sit down, and I said, look, stand up if you found you came to be in the room not by the marketing that attracted you, but you're a repeat customer. And I reckon about another 300 people stood up. So that's repeat business. I then said to this audience, stand up if you were referred into the audience today, like someone told you to come to the event and you got something out of it. And I had another couple hundred people stood up. And I said to the audience, stand up if one of the people running the event, and this was actually run by a digital platform called realestate.com.au, if a realestate.com.au account manager that was running the conference rang you and said, come and take a look at it. And in fact, what they did is they sold you into the event. They actually proactively hustled you into the event, searched for you, and dragged you in. Stand up if that's how you came to be in the audience today. Another couple of hundred people stood up. So I then said to the audience, stand up if you weren't profiled to, referred in, repeat customer, or proactively hustled into the audience, and not one person stood up. And I rest my case. Most of lead generation comes from those 4 areas. And so I think we make it very, very difficult for ourselves. But if we go into the example of making 30 plus sales, you can't do that volume without being incredibly clever around how you ask questions. So I'll give you a specific example. You list a property and you're sitting in front of the home seller, and they just put the contract back in front of you. We call it an agency agreement here in Australia, which is giving you the authorization to sell the property. Rather than just thanking them, why wouldn't you at that point just simply say to the client, look, in preparation, are you aware of anyone in your street that wants to buy your home? And the reason why I want to ask you that, Stephen, is because I want to know proactively who I can approach to obviously try and be a little forward thinking in putting the deal together. But really what you're trying to do is work out who your next seller is. Right down to, you know, Stephen, can I ask you, in relation to other properties coming on the market in your street, are you familiar with any of your neighbours or anyone in the direct area that might be actually considering coming onto the market? Or have you noticed anyone that's looking like they're preparing themselves for sale? Now, that little strategy there, of course, gives you the opportunity to know who the next person coming on the market is. So there's 100 different ways you can do that throughout the sales process. And I guess what I try and do from the time the property is listed right through to post-settlement, there's all these little moments in the process where I teach agents how to execute and to leverage that contact, right down to it could be settlement day, and you're there rather than the settlement, the keys being picked up at the office, or I'm not sure how you guys do the handover on settlement. Rather than that, meeting the client on site. And what I've always been fascinated with is you've got this seller and this buyer who sometimes don't want to meet, I get that. But all of a sudden, this seller's been in the house for 30 years and they've got all this amazing knowledge about the home and about the area. And we do a very, very poor job in pulling all that content out and actually handing that knowledge to our new purchaser. And if we just spend a little bit of time doing that and unpacking that, what that enables us to do is to say this very simple point to our seller that's going to be leaving the home. Our purchaser that's going to be moving to the home. Stephen, what I'd love to do for you every single year is give you an anniversary appraisal of the sale of your home. Now, we can either do that by a curbside or I can walk through and do that. I'm going to give you a call about a week out from your anniversary and we're going to do that. So all of a sudden, if you're an agent that is, say, presenting to or selling 50 properties a year and you've been selling for 4 or 5 years, you really should start the year with 250 appraisals. And the appraisals are a wonderful platform to start these conversations. And what I found with just simply going and giving people an appraisal price, they'll tell you things like the one across the road selling, by the way, great timing, mum's thinking of downsizing. So that just sort of starts with, how you can be really clever about things rather than it just being all about, cold call and door knocking. I just did a session today for McGrath on the Central Coast. This was Steinwade's team. We built a playbook and we've basically built every single step in the process, making sure that every single opportunity is run dry. Because when I work with high-performing agents, Steve, they're driven by the idea that if a signboard appears in their market and their name's not on it, there's this incredible obsession as to why they weren't called in. And it's that obsession that creates all this wonderful content. And some of the high performers I work with will actually drop in and speak to that seller, find out how they found that agent, what it was that made them, put that agent on and not talk to them. And then through that process, once it's sold, they'll find out how they do it. And what they're strategically doing is just trying to get ahead of the competition. So there's just a few little light ideas. There's so much more that can be spoken about on that subject. I'm just conscious of engaging the audience with the content that's relevant. So if anyone has any questions, Steve, about prospecting, any particular techniques?
Please put them in. Thank you. So morning, Mark. Thanks very much for joining us. What a great way to start the day. Ian Harris, thanks for joining us. So here's something that I've been suggesting actually. So, and you're right about settlement completion. So, we have an exchange. There may be 10 days between exchange and settlement and completion. So what I've been suggesting now, because of, safety issues, is do a Zoom call with your vendor. Do a tour as to what the buyer will want to know when they move in. So where's a boiler, where's the loft ladder, who the local dentist is, who their local doctor is, who their nicest neighbours are. Record it, and then 2 or 3 days before, actually send it to the buyer to say, look, I know you're settling or completing in a couple of days. I've just done a little video to make this transaction as smooth as you can. And just send it over, and again, totally agree with you, everything you said. It's about these little things that make a massive, massive difference. And in the UK,
there's an aspect of servicing, which I think doing the right thing by people and making you get sometimes leads handed to you. But the point I want to make here, you have to dig the leads out. When I'll sell about 60 or 70 units of training a month, so we have about 800 customers across Australia. And I reckon I've never marketed this business. I don't have to. I do a good job, and then leads traditionally come to me, but also I've got to dig them out. So you've got to be really strategic about harvesting the lead from that vendor or the buyer or anyone that's come to you strategically without it feeling like, they owe you something. So sorry, Steve, I cut you off. You were going to say something there?
No, that's absolutely fine. Morning, Sharon. Thanks very much for joining us. Can I come back on what you touched on? So I've also, Matt Steinwade's been a guest as well, 2 or 3 times, and Matt's got an incredible story. So high performance agency, what does that look like to you? What are the qualities of these high performers that you work with?
Very complex people, Stephen. And I think with Matt, I don't have to teach him how to be a real estate agent. I have to teach him how to apply himself in his team structure. I have to teach him how to be a team player, how to function within the team, how to lead the team. Just an example of, he's carrying a massive volume of sellers at the moment. And part of the challenge is getting to those sellers every day, because all these properties are getting inspections. So part of a lot of the introductions we've got is we've introduced, which we do with a lot of our clients, getting everyone on a WhatsApp, getting your vendors, your buyers, all your team members that are communicating to that campaign on the same platform, and every bit of correspondence goes through that. Just so if you've got an agent with lots of volume, you're able to manage that relationship quite effectively. Usually these guys, there's 3 things that I see specifically they have. One is drive. There's that it's never enough, and Matt is one of those guys. His goal is to do $10 million, which is a sale a day for 365 days. That'll get into $10 million. He's obviously had the first representation of that last month. That doesn't happen to an individual on their own. They need structure. The other thing that you find is that they have a weapon usually, right? And I find every salesperson has a weapon, and you need to know how to find out what that weapon is. And a really good coach will be able to identify that. Often identifying that not only comes through the observation of the coach, but it also comes through your coach interviewing some of your clients, which is how I do it. And I try and determine through the clients what it is that made them pick that agent, and through the delivery of the product, what was it that they found didn't work. I like to also find out who's running second and third place in the marketplace, and find out why the clients, when they were competing, they didn't win the listing, and why they're second and third, because that gives us competitive advantage on how to build the unique selling proposition of that agent. So once again, it's the weapons that agent carries. I was with an agent this morning. She's a female agent. She works in a place called Randwick here, and she has this amazing ability to communicate. Her communication is just her weapon, right? And I said to her just today, she was in her second month of coaching, we really need to build that out in your prospecting. We need you to tell better stories when you're referencing your case studies to your business pipeline. We need to be able to illustrate that in more visuals in what you're saying and doing. And so that came from, really looking at what her customers were saying. So you've got the agent's weapon, you've got the drive, and then I think overall product knowledge is a really important part. Now, for me, the unique selling proposition in the product knowledge isn't just the proposition of the agent and the skills that they have, or the brand, because brands like McGrath and some of these other big brands, they have their own USP. McGrath talks about a database, a centralized database that all buyers go into. So you could actually, as an agent, tap into in the McGrath database, now do a buyer match, and you're going to have 500,000 buyers that you can blast that listing at. That's one of their weapons. As an individual, my USP might be, I'm actually known for my organizational skills. My background was an executive assistant, and that's really what I'm good at. But the USP we often forget about, Stephen, is the unique selling proposition of the property we're selling. And what I'm really big at is helping an agent understand how they are going to uniquely sell the value of that property back to the market, and how do they prepare for that before the appraisal. So when they're walking through the home, the seller comes out of it going, wow, this agent can see more value in my property than what the competitors are. And in fact, I believe they can sell it for more money as a result of seeing things in my property that the other agents haven't.
Okay, so what are they doing then to prepare for that, to go in there, to make that USP of every property? What's their preparation?
You know what? It's really simple things. Printing out a copy of the title and seeing where the easements are. Because in Australia, we're a pretty hot place when it comes to summer. Are you seeing that the backyard, can you foresee that a pool's going to fit? Have you already spoken to a pool guy before you've gone in and talked about that? We have Airbnb, which is thriving here in Australia, right? Since we've got all our borders locked down, all this travel's happening in staying in the state. Now, have you gone to Airbnb and seen how much investors, how much tenants are paying per night on that Airbnb? So if that home was propositioned to the market as an Airbnb to the investor market, what could you say the return is right now? Have you gone and done that research and matched that to long-term rental capability? So there's all these things that you can do, but you've got to really think in advance in relation to how can I actually think about this up front to be able to take that unique angle. I mean, a lot of it is discovered in the listing presentation. I mean, a lot of what I coach is asking questions that bring the client to a place of silence. I did an executive coaching course many years ago, Steve. I remember my executive coach, I did an MBA in this, and he said, whenever you ask a question of someone and it brings that person to a place of silence where they can't answer it and you can see their eyes are rolling up, it means the question's working. You're actually rattling their subconscious mind. And so a great question to ask a seller when you're walking through their home is what's unique about your property, Steve, that you would only know about by living here? Talk to me about the fact that you bought it, and since you've lived here, what's a unique feature that I can't see that you only get by experiencing by living in the house? And what you typically get is an incredibly emotional response to that, which then we've got to talk about how we uniquely put that to the market in marketing, how we're going to talk about it in our inspections, how we're going to leverage that just as the negotiation starts playing out. We do a lot of auctions in Australia, how the auctioneer is going to call it out at the auction. So there's lots of different ways you can tap into the uniqueness of that. And sometimes it's working against the opposite. So sometimes it's saying, look, part of what I think I'm going to do to protect the value of your home is, can I ask, when you bought it, what did you use to talk the price down? It's not just all about selling unique features. It's about combating the things that are going to hit us, and how is your agent going to be able to uniquely defend that? So if you've got a house and there's a power pole right out the front, or you're on a main road, or you've got some sort of funny shaped block, or how is the agent going to manage that? So it's all these, I think, things that we need to sort of look at before we go in, Steve.
Well, one of the things that I remember from when I was with Troy and we were there on a Friday is that they had open for inspections or auctions on a Saturday, and that all the team would sit down before and say, right, what objections are we likely to get tomorrow? Let's make sure we can handle all of those. So saying professionals practice before they play. And to me, that demonstrated how great they are. So again, is there any tips that you can give? I mean, obviously training's massively important. So, what sort of things should agents be doing training wise with their teams? Is it once a week? Is it 5 minutes? Is it in a director meeting in the morning? Again, with what's best practice for the agents that you've working with when it comes to training and objections and etc.?
Well, first of all, training is not always the solution to this stuff. And let me just separate the different products available in the marketplace to improve your performance around things like objection handling. First of all, you have training. So training is, if we use the term, training is off-the-shelf content as I'm delivering it now, with really no consideration of a tailored bit of content. Rather, it's just, here's what I think you should do. It's a talk ad. Then we have coaching. So coaching is more questions-based. It's, Stephen, show me how you do that. So a really good coach will watch you make a phone call. They'll watch you do a presentation. They'll listen to what, and then they will tailor their content to fit your approach. Then you have mentoring, and I find a lot of salespeople, I'm into thoroughbred racehorsing here, so we have a lot of horse races over here. So real estate agents are like racehorses, and it is often the headspace that stops the performance. So mentorship is all around looking after human. Then you've got the accountability, which is, for me, accountability isn't just show me what you've done. There are a lot of different ways you can hold people accountable. Part of the accountability process is following through on the promise. So if we talk about, I think people need a blend of all four. And I think part of the process of the training is minimum 1 hour of training a week, backed up with a minimum of a 1 hour fortnightly one-on-one, which is more of a coaching and mentoring and accountability conversation. So you can unload the training generally to everyone, but then every single individual needs the one-on-one structure to unpack it, to just think through what, work through their mindset, excuses. Let's now practice it, say it back to me. So I think it sort of needs to be separated. But generally, I reckon 1 hour of training a week, fortnightly one-on-one, and then you would usually typically have a sales meeting that goes for an hour with a really well-structured sales meeting. I've got several agendas that I can send. You can send to your audience that gives you a bit of structure around that. To me, that's about enough to get them going. And then some of the agents that aren't performing, I talk to business owners about putting them in, I call it the ICU. There's a few people in ICU, unfortunately, around the world at the moment with Corona. I'm talking the intensive care unit of salespeople that aren't performing, which means they need daily accountability.
Okay, and I'd like to come on with that, and thank you for your kind offer on that. So that'd be grateful. So if you like that morning meeting structure or agenda, just put yes in the comments, and as soon as I get it from Daniel, I will send it over to you. So just put yes in the comments. Daniel, that's very kind. Thank you. So accountability is massive. And actually implementation is massive, just trying to get people to implement stuff. So again, for people watching this, business owners, and actually for negotiators, the best top performers that I see are the ones that take action and implement stuff. Others just are happy not to do it. Again, what tips and advice can you give to people just to take action and get things done?
Well, it's a lot easier when you're recruiting people to recruit learners and implementers. So one way I would do that is, when was the last time you read a book and what did you do with that information? When was the last time you went to a training conference and what did you do with that information? Can you give me some specific examples of a conference you've gone to, something that you picked up and where you applied it? And if they've got nothing, you're probably dealing with someone that has what I call a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset. So it's just a lot easier if you can think about your recruitment that way. Now, once you have a learner in place, it's really a case of trying to find out from their perspective where they've, so for me, when I'm coaching, I look at the historical background of that age and I go right back to their childhood, parenting, personal values, times in their life where they've had hard times, good times. I look at the different people they've had in their world, whether it's a sporting coach, school teacher, ex-work boss, the best ones they've had and why they responded well to them. How did they treat you? What did that look like? Why did you respond? Why did you thrive under their leadership? Once we do all that, we go to the now, we look at what their challenges are, and then we look at where they want to be. Now, it's not for me to turn around and say, you should do $10 million or $1 million or 500 or make 10 or 50 or 100 sales. My job is to, what do you want to become? And the good news is, so far across Australia, I've worked with the number one, and I've also worked with new starters. So I've got a cross section of knowing how to get people there. And so we discover that, and then through that process, we begin to sort of map out an accountability plan around that. And for some people, you accountability plan is about how many people they're prospecting and reaching out to daily, and then we look at how many appraisals they're getting and how many listings, and that's just basic KPI work. But I find a lot of people really don't tap into enough of their why. So what I do with them, Steve, I tap into really getting them to understand how much it's costing to run their life now. So what is the cost of running their life annually? And I'll spend 15, 20 minutes on it. And we might find out that salesperson's costing $100,000 to run their life. And then I ask them about what they want that they don't have in their life now. These are called their goals. Some people are really clear. Some people are a bit fuzzy. If they're fuzzy, I help them, work out what those things are. Once we work out what those things are, we then monetize those things. So the combination of the things that they don't have now and the things that keeps their lifestyle going, that creates a number for us. And I often go to a business owner, I say to them, look, your number you've put on the board for this guy, you've said that he needs to make 50 sales a year, but can I tell you, based on what I've worked out, he's only going to make 30. Why? Because he's told me that. Yep. So I can't say how often I think he can do this. It doesn't really matter what you think. It's what they want to do. And so part of what I try and do is try and help them understand that why. Often the mindset that I'll get sometimes working with people is money's not important. What I really get them to change is, the physical money holding in your hand's not important, but it's the freedom that it gives you, which is what we're all striving for. And so do you want freedom? And if you want freedom, then we need to have this thing called money, and I'd like to help you get that. And so once we sort of unpick all that, we've generally got the plan mapped out. We know what they need to earn. We map that back to connects. Generally, what I work off is for every appraisal that you do, so a presentation, 1 in 5 we list generally. I work that as a ratio because the other 3 never make it, and we work on a 50-50 conversion. That's generally the number that works for me. And at that point, we measure that and we help them win the business, and then they get the listing on and it's sold. And it depends on what market. At the moment, everything in Australia is selling. This has been the first time that I've seen in this country every single market's red hot. And what's pretty much happened is the government's pretty much put all these grants out there, first homeowner grants and builder grants, and the market's just rocketing, and every real estate agent's making reasonably good money, but low volume of inventory and stock at the moment. So everyone's sort of fighting and fees are coming down. It's the general market we find ourselves in.
Okay, so a couple of things. I want to talk about overcoming fees, if I can, in a sec.
Yep.
Just coming back to accountability, consequences. So, if people aren't hitting where they want to be and what you've agreed with, what sort of consequences are there with them? And how, as a coach, what are you saying to them? Because I know there's a few people watching this that, that really find that challenging.
Well, there's people that look at the reward versus the non-reward. Some people have it set up, if you do this, the reward clearly is the listing. But then what are you going to do if you don't do it? So setting non-rewards for people sometimes can work. I like buddying people up, particularly young competitive people. So I might buddy them up and And we might have a little thing going where if you don't hit your call number for the week, what's your penalty? You know, whoever gets the least amount of calls washes the other guy's car. And you just wouldn't believe, setting the most simple non-rewards up, how these young guys go just helter-skelter because they don't want to wash each other's car. Or I had another guy who was a high performer the other day, worked for another real estate brand, and I got him to agree that if he didn't do his volume of past client calls that I wanted him to do, bringing his past clients and just re-engaging, that he was going to send his nearest competitor a bottle of wine and tell him one done on a listing he just lost. And he got an agreement signed on that. I had the bottle of wine and I was going to post it if he didn't make the call. I got his personal assistant to show me how many calls he'd made, and it drove him to do it. So different ways. And the other one, and the more, that's, you know, in its simple form, but sometimes what I'll do, a little bit more complex, I'll first of all, I'll ask permission to hold them accountable to it. And if they don't follow through on it, I like to go right back to, where did it fall over? Was it in your diary? Was it in Outlook? What did you prioritize? What got in the way? What's another way of rethinking how we can do it next time? Let's put it back in the diary for Thursday and have another shot at it. Now, can you forecast anything this time around getting in the way of doing that? No. Well, what I'm going to do at 5 minutes to 2, when you're about to start, I'm going to send you a little rev up text, and then I'll check in with you at 4 o'clock and see how you did. That's how I manage the people I coach. And I don't do that with everyone, but some of them, if they do a false start, then I'll obviously apply that. Now, even Matt on our third coaching session, he just didn't turn up. Now, I just don't. And he's obviously done that to other people in the past. And I stood up for us in the relationship and managing that. I just said, Matt, we can do time better. And I didn't put all the blame. We can do time on better, even though he didn't bloody turn up. And just putting that we can do time better, what that actually did for him is I just said, mate, you can not turn up, but just always give me the courtesy. And I loved I just wrote this down the other day. Robin Sharma put this up. I just love what he wrote. I'm just going to share this with you. He said, saying please to someone, Stephen, means I appreciate you. Saying thank you, even on email, all right? So you get something, thank you. Just say thank you means I respect you. Punctuality, which is what I was pleading from Matt, is the trade of royalty and respect. Just turning up on time. And these days, on time's late. I always say on time's 10 minutes early. And the last one, remembering someone's name, Stephen, means I genuinely want to get to know you. So those people that think you're not good with names, you just genuinely don't want to get to know that person. Just such simple ideas, yeah?
Yes, well, I was just listening to Robin Sharma this morning. I get his daily podcast. So as I was going for a little walk, I listened to what he had to say this morning. So I follow Robin Sharma. So, and maybe that's another question. I don't know how much time you've got because I'm conscious it's now.
I'm good rolling. I'm good.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to you and ask you about books and stuff in a bit because you keep on throwing questions at other questions for me to ask you. But
you want to do the fee one because I've got some good stuff on that. Hold on, fees.
I was coming back to overcoming fees. So
what's the issue? Give me a bit of context around that. Yeah.
So thanks very much for coming around today. I've got Rain and Horn coming round, and they've already told me that they're going to charge half of what you're going to charge. So, you know, in a nice way, I'll rather use them. That's going to save me $20,000, £20,000.
And Steve, I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up. And can I say, in our marketplace, you know, the fees range actually from 1% to about 2.5% in our marketplace. So there's a really good cross range of fees that are available. Now, we position ourselves at 2.5%, and Rain and Horn position themselves at 1.8. Now, the interesting thing about that, Steve, is Rain and Horn know what we charge, and we know what they charge. So my question to you is, if we both know what each other charges, why do you think they come in at 1.8 when we're at 2.5? Have you thought about that? And then you call?
No, I haven't.
You really thought about that?
No.
Why wouldn't they just come in at about 2.3%? You know why, Steve? Because if they did, they would not get any business. And what they do is they low fee charge to distract you away from the benefits that we offer that ultimately leads to you selling it for a higher price. And they do it as a hoodwinking tool. So it's basically designed for you to be distracted away from the benefits we offer onto their low cost fee structure. Now, if they did it for 2.5% like us, they just know they wouldn't list anything. So if I can bring it back to Steve, what was the main reason that you called us in the first place? What was the thing that put us on the shop?
I was recommended to you. So one of my neighbours, you sold one of my neighbours' properties about six months ago, and they recommended you. So, out of courtesy, I thought I'd get you in. I do also know somebody at Rain and Horn, so that's again, because I know them, I've got a relationship with them. I thought it'd be a good idea as well, obviously, to get them in, and then that potentially that 1%, it all adds up, and I want the best.
It is a lot of money. Let's break that down for a moment. So the person that referred us, what did they say about our services? Can you recall?
Well, they said you were, they were exceptional. They said the communication was great. They actually loved the WhatsApp messages that you did. So the communication, I knew exactly what was going on. Sorry, they knew exactly what was going on the whole time from start to finish.
And do you think that communication that was validated through that will actually help you sell for a higher price? Because if we're doing that to you, then no doubt we'd be doing that for the buyer. Can you see how that would benefit you?
Yeah, I can.
Yep. Okay, great. And you mentioned the 1% fee difference. Now, on the sale of your property, let's just pull that all apart. 1% of what you're selling for is roughly about $5,000. Which is a lot of money, Steve. But I just recently sold a property 3 weeks ago where that property, I actually had 4 buyers on it. And across those 4 buyers, we extracted 18 bids. Now, on those 18 bids, the average bid increment was $15,000. Now, can I just quantify it? $5,000 is a lot of money, but it's a third of a bid, Steve. And what I'd like to be able to do is show you how we extracted those 15 bids, because ultimately what that's going to show you is not all agents can sell your home for the same price. And in fact, if you had 2 different agents selling your home, you get 2 different prices. And so on the surface, $5,000 for anyone's a lot of money, but in the context of bids, it's a third of a bid. So my advice always to clients is measure the success. If it's fees that you're talking about, measure the success not necessarily on what you can save up front, but when the property sells, measure that against the sale price of the home. Who can actually extract the most out of the marketplace, and what are their fundamental differences in helping you do so? And I would then lean into something like, one of the ones that I teach to simplify it is, if you want a premium price for your property, the way you create this through 2 very basic fundamentals. Number one, you have to have the best marketing strategy and lead conversion strategy. So it's not all about just putting marketing out there. You've got to know how to convert the leads. So what is your agent doing to convert those leads, and who can show you they can maximize the buyer pool? The second part is the negotiation strategy. And when you combine marketing and great lead management and nurture and great negotiation skills, and that agent needs to know at least the 6 main scenarios that they find themselves in. When you combine those 2, you have this magic that appears, which is called the premium price. Now, you could be the best negotiator in the world, but without any leads, you're useless. Vice versa, you could be the best marketer of real estate, but if you don't know how to put a deal together strategically, you're going to leave money on the table. So what I'd like to do is show you more about how we market, how we actually make phone calls proactively to find our buyers, how we convert those leads, how we line them all up, put them under a pressure cooker situation. And then when we go into the negotiation, I want to show you how we actually put the deal together. Mostly of which, you're going to end up with about half a dozen different scenarios. Let me talk you through how we would manage those. And if your agent can't articulate that, you just simply won't be selling it for a premium, Steve. Selling the home is usually an easy thing to do. Most will be able to do it. Selling it for a premium is the differentiator. That's the hard bit. Why would someone pay more for your home when there's 10 sets of factual evidence around that says it's only worth that?
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Appreciate that. So coming back, couple final questions, because I am conscious of time. So yourself, you talked about fixed mindset and growth mindset. I know that you've gone through some challenging times yourself personally, and I believe you're below knee amputee. So how have you dealt with that and become incredibly resilient, run an incredible business, give absolutely world-class advice, coaching, mentoring, accountability? Must have been very challenging as well for yourself with everything you've been through.
Yes, I was born with a problem in my foot called lymphangioma. I tried to keep the foot for 14 years. It just got too much. So I had it amputated when I was 14. It was my choice, no one else's. I just didn't want to carry this big hunk of meat around. Sometimes the worst things that happen to you in the world, or sometimes the things that don't happen to you that you wish did, like having a normal leg, are the best things that can happen to you. And so what made that become a good thing for me was building that resilience. And to me, resilience isn't necessarily grinding things out all day long, burning the midnight oil. That's not what resilience is. And you see, the SAS soldiers having resilience. That's not what resilience is. Resilience was seeing my wife have our 2 children, and just the incredible sight. Those of you who haven't been through that, it's one of the most amazing experiences I've ever seen. But resilience for me is all about the bounce back. So for me, it's about being able to sustain a high speed, but also a high sense of work ethic for about 45 minutes to an hour, resting for 10 minutes and being able to bounce back. So an example of that is a resilient agent that, say, misses a listing opportunity because they've gone for someone else. To me, missing it, the resilient real estate agent looks inside themselves. First of all, they ring the client and try and find out, where they went wrong and get the feedback. They will then have a predetermined reaction to the resilience of losing that listing, because everyone loses business. Part of that predetermined reaction is, if I lose a listing, and this is how my high performers work, I'm going to make 50 phone calls I would not normally have made, and that empowers me. And it's the same if I have a buyer and the buyer all of a sudden falls over. That's disappointing, right? Unpack it, dust yourself off, find out what you could have done a little bit better, but then make 100 phone calls, 50 to 100 phone calls of buyers you would not normally have rung if that event didn't happen. I guarantee you'll stumble over more buyers, more sellers. It's just that pathway wasn't the journey you were meant to go on. So resilience is the bounce back. It's your ability to be able to dust off really quickly, acknowledge it, own it, and then just return back to normal. And to me, I coach agents around their time management, doing things in 45 to 50-minute bursts, rest for 10, go again. So do things in surges. And what you'll typically do is get a resilient agent. And resilience, in the context of real estate, and I have quite a few psychologists and counselors that I refer to our clients when the resilience needs to somewhat be found. And what I find is that by just simply, as a real estate agent, having someone to offload your challenges to, whether it's coaches or psychologists, it really helps clean your energy. So you need to clean your mental energy, then you need to clean your physical energy. When I just came back from a run then, I was in a workshop for 3 hours a day, a couple of coaching sessions, knew I had this. I went for a run for 45, 50 minutes. Now I've got one leg, but I still run 30 Ks a week. Did a run, felt flushed out. I feel like I could go around again. Now, I probably wouldn't feel quite as good if I didn't go for the run and flush things out. Didn't have some time. I just had dinner because it's nearly 7 o'clock here. And, you reset and you can just bounce back. But you need to know what works for you in that bounce back. That's, to me, what resilience is.
Brilliant. Thank you. So what do you do? What are the 3 best books that you've come across or that you recommend to your clients to read?
Well, I pulled this one out for you. This is for the business owners. Ray Dalio, Principles. It's a great book if you haven't read that one. I've got a lot of books back here. Another one of my favorites, a bit of a think here. I would be, there's a great book that an author called Nicholas Boothman authored, Boothman. He's from the UK, and he authored a book, How to Get Someone to Like You in Under 90 Seconds. I really enjoyed that book. It's so simple. I like nice big fonts too, Stephen. Nice big fonts, 130 pages. He gets to the point, really relevant. And there's another one, I think Steve London authored it. It's called Top Performer. It's How Buskers Make Money. And, oh, wow, I really enjoyed that book. Another reasonably short read. And that book is all about a guy who discovers a busker. I think he discovers it in Harrods in London, actually, this particular busker called Top Hat. He gets put onto another busker who works, I think, in Ireland. He's called the rat catching. This rat catcher busker teaches him how to busk. And you learn all your presentation skills you'll ever need to learn, because the fundamental of busking is exactly the same as pitching, right? You've got to impress the client. You've got to pass the hat at the end. Hopefully there's money for it. And just the strategies in that book in Top Performer is a really, really great read.
What was the author called, please?
I think it's Steve London. He authored the book Fish as well. And then on a personal development, I'm really big on, if you've got kids, Raising Boys by Steve Biddulph. If you've got children, Raising Boys and Raising Girls. Then there's The Conscious Parent if you've got kids. Shalife, I'll get you the author's surname, but that's a great book. And if you have had death in your family, which I'm often sending this book out, particularly at the moment with everything going on around the world, Many Minds, Many Masters. It's a wonderful read, and it gets you thinking very, very differently about your world and your life. So there's a couple, 5 or 6 there for you guys to.
Amazing. I'm incredibly grateful, as I'm sure everybody else is, whether watching this now, whether watching it on replay, whether listening to on podcast, for your time tonight or this morning. Thank you so much for your time. I can understand why James highly recommends you. You're absolutely exceptional with everything that you've given this morning. If people want to find you and get hold of you, Daniel, what's the best place, please?
I'm on LinkedIn. So if you type in Daniel Spencer, Activate, ACTIVATE growth, you'll find me on LinkedIn right now. I'd love for you to join me. I usually put up a couple of different videos a week. So we do a lot of strategy builds, and you'll see it's very content rich. But if you want to email me direct, it's Daniel at Activate, ACTIVATE growth.com.au, activategrowth.com.au, or just find me on LinkedIn, Steve.
Brilliant, fantastic. Look, thanks very much for your time. Thanks everyone for watching this morning, listening, watching on replay. On Thursday at 12:30, I'm going to be joined by Peter Rawlings, who is the godfather of sales in the estate agency, who was CEO at Foxtons and Marsh & Parsons. So loads of great learnings there and listening. So please join me for that. Daniel, I'm incredibly grateful for your time. So thank you very much. In the UK, have an amazing Tuesday. Very successful, very productive. Daniel, you have a lovely evening there.
You too. Thanks, everyone. Bye.